Okay, I know I said that I wasn't going to do the other video tonight, but I really have nothing to do except for watch Supernatural and keep my roommate away from the Cheez-Its, so might as well. So my other video tonight, you know you're not supposed to be having those right now. Those are for bribes. Anyway, my other video was about how to deal with self-harm and recovering from self-harm if you actually self-harm. But the other side of the story is if you have a friend or loved one who self-harms themselves and you don't know what to do, because that's scary. And I just want to address, you know, the best way to help them. And again, I just want to make it clear that everybody is different. You know, just because someone self-harms does not mean that they fall into this category of self-harming people who all act the same way and all need the same kind of care. But this is just kind of general stuff. So please keep in mind that not all of this is going to apply to every person. The first thing is you need to understand that self-harm, I mean, it's scary for you to know somebody who self-harms and, you know, to know that this is part of their life and something they struggle with. But self-harm is scary for the person who's committing it, too. So, like, the best way to open the conversation is not to walk up to that person and be like, hey, I noticed that you have cuts on your arm. Are you cutting yourself? Don't do that. Like, I feel like the best way to open that conversation, and something I say all the time is, like, it's not actually about the self-injury. It's about what's causing them to be in the kind of mental place where they're self-injuring. So, like, if you feel like you need to bring it up, talk to them about situations. You know, say something to them like, you know what, you seem to be having a hard time lately, and I worry that maybe, you know, you're having a difficult time coping with stuff. Something like that, like, open it up about reasons they might be self-harming, not about the fact that they're self-harming. And at the end of the day, you know, really, self-harm is a super, super private thing for a lot of people, and it's something that a lot of people aren't going to be willing to talk about. So unless you feel like that person is actually, like, in imminent danger, this is not something where you should be running off to someone and saying, hey, I think so-and-so is self-harming and you should do something about it. Because even though I know that most educational material out there, like, the first thing on their list is, if you think someone is self-harming, go tell their parents or a trusted adult. You know what? To be totally honest, that is not always the best course of action, especially since a lot of people have parents who are not supportive and who might not know how to help them. So it's really something where you need to be careful and you need to use your judgment and kind of try to make sure that this is something that is comfortable and feels safe for the person you're trying to help. And, you know, there are going to be situations where someone is putting their own life in danger, and then, yeah, you know, you might have to get them professional help. You might have to start them on something that they don't want to do for their own good. But until it gets to the point where you feel like if you don't do that, they are actually going to quite possibly kill themselves or, you know, do something really serious like that, this is something where it should be about them and their feelings, not about following the textbook steps for what you're supposed to do when someone is harming themselves. That being said, let's say that you've had a conversation with someone, you know that they self-harm, you know it's something they struggle with. The very first thing that I have to tell you to do is do not guilt this person about what they're doing. And, like, I know that that sounds like, you know, like a really obvious thing, but you might not know that you're doing it. Like, statements like, I don't understand why you're doing this, or statements like, can't you see that it hurts me too when you do that, stuff like that, that's not helping anybody. Guilting somebody about the fact, or saying stuff like, will you not self-harm for me? Like, I know that that sounds like the kind of thing that could probably help them, but I feel like for a lot of people that will just make them feel worse, because I think most people already feel guilty about the fact that they self-harm. And, like, we really do not need you compounding that. So, like, try really, really, really hard not to make conversations about this into, look at how many bad things you're making happen when you do this. Because they're already in a negative state of mind, you know, and that's not going to help. So try to keep your conversations positive, keep your input on the situation positive, and do not make them feel bad about what they're doing. The other thing is, like, if you talk out with them, you know, I'm going to take away your sharp objects, I'm going to take away your lighter, you know, whatever they harm themselves with, understand that, like, just yanking all their stuff from them is not going to fix the problem. You can't take away all of somebody's X-Acto blades or take away their scissors or whatever and say, okay, problem fixed, just because you can't cut. Because they're not just cutting to cut. You know, people harm themselves because there are underlying issues that are putting them in a place where they feel like they need to do that. And you need to fix the underlying thing. The two of you need to fix it together, or, you know, that person and their support group needs to fix that underlying reason. You can't just say, well, you are physically unable to harm yourself now, so the problem is fixed. It's not about stopping them physically from cutting. It's about taking them out of that place where they feel like they need to do it. So the other thing is, when you're talking about this kind of stuff with them, you know, you need to be there, and you need to be supportive, and you need to be non-judgmental, because that's the kind of person, that's the kind of friend or loved one that this person needs. And that includes not saying stuff like, you know what, I think you're imagining that, or I think it's not as bad as you're saying it is. It's you know, I think you're maybe overreacting a little bit. Because that kind of stuff, that's called gaslighting. Gaslighting is when you try to convince someone that their fears and worries are invalid. That's going to put them in a really bad place. So even if you personally feel like maybe their situation isn't as bad as they're making it out to be, you don't need to say that. And saying that isn't going to help them, even if you think it's going to like help them realize that their situation, it's not going to do that. It's just going to put them in a worse place and make them doubt themselves and make them feel like they're bothering you or being a burden or being ridiculous. So even if you don't feel like what they're saying is legitimate, or like you feel like they're exaggerating or something, just, you know, just be there and say, you know what, I'm really sorry that that's how you feel about it, or, you know, I'm sorry that it's making you feel like that. There is like no benefit to telling somebody, I don't think that's really what's going on, when you're talking to them about things that make them feel like they need to self-harm. So yeah, basically being there, understanding that physically stopping them from cutting or harming themselves is not fixing the self-harm, and understanding that when you're trying to fix problems like this, you have to focus on that person and their feelings, as opposed to just running to get help because that's what you're supposed to do. Yeah, I think that's basically everything I wanted to cover. If you guys have questions, anything that you still want covered, go ahead, ask in the comments. I would be more than happy to put up another video about this stuff, explaining stuff like that. I'm losing my voice. And as always, my ask boxes on both of my blogs, links to which I'm going to put in the description, are always open. You can ask anonymously, but those will have to be published. If you don't want it published and you have a Tumblr, you can ask off and on, just ask me to keep it private. And those are always open if you need advice, if you need help, if you feel like you're going to self-harm, if you know someone who self-harms, anything at all, like anything having to do with eating disorders, anything having to do with my boyfriend was a jerk today, like anything. So, thanks again for watching, and please let me know any videos you would want to see in the future, because I still need fodder. So, have a nice night. Bye-bye.